the Second World War ends in fire and rubble. By 1945, the balance of global power is entirely unrecognizable. The Red Army now occupies half the European continent. Joseph Stalin's military grip has tightened around capitals from Warsaw to Bucharest. Looking at this map, President Harry Truman does something counterintuitive. He shuts down the Office of Strategic Services, America's wartime spy network. He is acting on a deep historical fear that maintaining a secret intelligence service during peacetime would eventually lead to an American Gestapo. But dismantling that network carries an immediate cost. The United States government suddenly realizes it is completely blind to Soviet intentions. It had been less than 4 years since the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The idea of being caught completely unaware again, especially now that the world possessed atomic weapons, causes outright panic among defense officials in Washington. The American instinct to reject a secret police force slammed directly into the terrifying reality of a potential Soviet strike. That collision left a massive void that someone had to fill. Truman quickly accepts that the pre-war rules no longer apply. The United States requires a permanent, globe-spanning intelligence service to operate in peacetime. His first attempt at a fix is the Central Intelligence Group. It operates as a weak, temporary band-aid of an agency, relying entirely on other departments for its budget and its staff. Meanwhile, the Soviet KGB is operating as the gold standard of espionage, running ruthless, highly disciplined networks. To combat them, Washington is under immense pressure to write a concrete legal framework for a permanent American apparatus. But building that permanent intelligence structure means first untangling and unifying the fragmented United States military, and that requirement ignites a vicious bureaucratic turf war. Before anyone could worry about KGB operatives in Europe, the architects of this new spy agency had to survive the rival American government departments fighting for their own institutional survival. After the war, military budgets face severe cuts. Every dollar given to one branch is a dollar taken from another, forcing the Army, the Navy, and the newly forming Air Force into a cutthroat, bitter competition for resources. Under the Army's Collins Plan, the existing structure would be dismantled, swallowed by a single central command. For the other branches, this execution order would erase the Navy's independence and completely suffocate the new Air Force. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal launches a desperate counteroffensive to protect his fleet from being absorbed. He commissions the Eberstadt Report, a study arguing that putting all military power in one place would fail the test of modern war. Instead, the Navy advocates for a decentralized system managed by a new National Security Council. Then Secretary of State George Marshall steps into the fight, fiercely opposing both military plans. Marshall reviews the proposals for an independent, highly centralized spy agency and sees a massive risk. He warns that a permanent intelligence body with unlimited powers could easily bypass the State Department and hijack American foreign policy. 3 competing, highly paranoid visions lock the government in a stalemate. A desperate national security necessity is swallowed entirely by a bitter internal deadlock. Months of congressional hearings and closed-door screaming matches finally produce a messy, hurried truce. On July 26, 1947, President Truman delays a flight just long enough to sign the National Security Act into law aboard his presidential aircraft. The legislation forces the War and Navy departments into an awkward marriage, officially establishes the Air Force, forms the National Security Council, and officially births the Central Intelligence Agency. But to get the warring departments to agree, the drafters had to compromise on the actual text. The section defining the CIA is kept intentionally short and remarkably vague. The law states the CIA's job is to gather intelligence, but adds a highly flexible clause allowing the agency to perform such other functions and duties as directed by the National Security Council. The architects of the act were trying to settle an office dispute, but their choice of vague language created a new, sweeping legal horizon. If a mission didn't fit the definition of intelligence gathering, it could now hide under these other functions. In practice, the 1947 Act failed to unify much of anything. James Forrestal, appointed as the very first Secretary of Defense, found himself nearly powerless to control the independent military branches operating under him. Recognizing the structural weakness, Congress pushed through the National Security Act amendments of 1949, forcibly centralizing authority and creating the modern Department of Defense. In that same window, the CIA secured its own legislative upgrade. The Central Intelligence Agency Act of 1949 was designed to give the agency unprecedented financial secrecy to run operations worldwide without leaving a paper trail. The black budget placed a screen between the agency and the public. The CIA no longer had to disclose salaries, personnel, or internal structure. By removing the public audit, this financial cloaking mechanism permanently severed the CIA from standard oversight. In just 2 years, the legislative fixes of 1949 transformed a loosely defined intelligence group into a nearly untouchable government within a government. The original 1947 mandate was pitched as a centralized way to gather and analyze information. That bears little resemblance to the scale of the modern intelligence community. Since the turn of the 21st century, the United States has poured over $500 billion into its intelligence networks, shifting heavy resources into offensive cyber capabilities and paramilitary operations. That massive infusion of cash funded the creation of secret global detention sites and the deployment of lethal armed drone strikes across multiple continents. Yet this lethal, high-tech apparatus justifies its expansive reach by pointing back to the same vague, flexible legal foundation laid down in the 1940s. The sprawling, unchecked scale of the modern security state is the accidental residue of a 1940s office dispute. It is a system built on compromises that were never meant to last, yet never quite went away.